Good morning, cooperative education students. This is Katie Birch, your cooperative education teacher. We're in course code DC030, semester 2A. Today we're working on topic 9, and we're going to be talking about gender on the job. Just a reminder, classes are Monday to Thursday from 9 a.m. until 10. Really, classes are only about 30 to 40 minutes recorded, and then the rest of the time you have to work on your assignments. Usually takes about an hour and a half, I would say. Don't be shy. Reach out if you need help. kbirch@nnec.on.ca. If you're not already in Google Classroom, you got a motor there because we're almost halfway through the course. This week, we're going to be filling out our cooperative education learning plans, and then you're going to be start collecting your hours for work placement. All right, what are we talking about today? We're talking about gender equality in the workforce. Where did we start in Canada? And where are we now with gender roles in the workplace? And do they still play a major factor in the workplace, or is it all the same? So in the 21st century, which is what we're in now, isn't everything equal now? Aren't everybody paid the same, whether they're a man or a woman, or they identify as a gender even at all? We're going to take a look at that today. So we're going to start off by having a look at globally where we stand with gender in the workplace. So I'm just going to pull up a video for you. And this video can also be found in Google Classroom. I'll pop it in there for you, A Global History of Women's Rights. We're just going to start off the video just to get us thinking, and then we're going to go take a look at the text and look at how gender roles have changed for Canada over time, which has been quite a bit. All right, so we're moving down to topic 9, gender on the job, and we're going to jump into this video here.
Women and girls are leaders, change makers, caretakers, and peacekeepers. But while they have an empowered role in our societies, to this day, women and girls are still forced to fight for their rights. How much progress have we achieved, and how much work remains? How can you carry on the fight for equal rights? Women's struggle for equal rights is centuries old. But 1848 marked a watershed moment for women's rights with the Seneca Falls Convention, where women activists publicly petitioned for their civil, social, political, and religious rights. In 1893, New Zealand sent a message to other activists across the world that equal voting rights were achievable through advocacy. Entering the 20th century, women around the world are mobilizing in ever greater numbers to campaign for gender equality, just as women's role in the labor force is rapidly evolving by opening up options beyond caretaking roles. In 1945, the United Nations is formed in response to the destructive toll of 2 world wars, and Eleanor Roosevelt oversees the drafting of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For all the world to hear, she and other advocates underline the place of women's rights within. This sets a foundation for women's rights norms and standards at the international level. In the subsequent decades, just as women are taking historic leadership positions in government, women activists at the grassroots level dovetail with the worldwide momentum by becoming powerful symbols of feminist resistance and social change. This momentum reaches a climax in 1995 when the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action presents a visionary global agenda for women and girls' rights. But in spite of all the progress, as we enter the 21st century, patriarchal stigmas persist and exemplary leaders arise to resist them. With the rise of the digital age, social media emerges as a crucial tool to galvanize populations in the fight against injustice. A single woman's voice is now louder than ever. Grassroots activists trigger social movements online and offline, from cities to villages, inspiring future generations of women and girl leaders. After relentless campaigning, these movements generate changes in policy that signal a true shift in international attitudes and practice towards equal rights. Where are we now? A quarter century after the Beijing Declaration, women and men must mobilize together to overcome the remaining obstacles to gender equality. They must fight for an end to gender-based violence, for access to healthcare, for equal pay, and for equal participation in political life. The ink isn't dry. Be a part of Generation Equality and let us continue to write history together.
All right, so that was a really nice start to today's class where we've come quite far with gender equality, but we still have a long way to go. So we're going to take a specific look at where Canada started and where they are now. You'll see that in the last video, basically, New Zealand led the way with women having the right to vote before anyone else in the world. So the year was 1951. The Second World War had been for over 6 years, and women had successfully served in most industries while the men fought during the war. So women at that time were holding jobs that the war wanted to know why well-paying jobs had disappeared and why employers suddenly appeared reluctant to hire women at all. So during the war, women were needed to run these machines and these workshops, but as soon as the men returned from war, they were, reluctant to hire women again. This is just a picture here of a lady who had been working for the Bren Gun organization, and it's shown in the picture where an employee at the John Ingalls Company plant where Bren light machine guns were made during the Second World War. And during the war, Canadian women worked in logging, in aerospace, in shipbuilding and ammunitions and manufacturing. But after the war, things changed. So the timeline of women's accomplishments in Canada. So in 1871, women pretty much did common occupations that were to do with caregiving, like that video outlined. Clothing, housekeeping, teaching were the common occupations for women. In 1871, men and women both worked in the textile industry in the same numbers, okay? In other industries, female workers were being replaced by male workers. So only in textile did you see the equal amount of women versus men, whereas other industries after wars, the men were pretty much the predominant workers in the factories. In 1871 and 1881, in the censuses for those years, teaching was the largest occupational category for women. Okay, 1875, a woman named Grace Annie Lockhart is the first Canadian woman to be awarded a university degree at Mount Allison University. Let's just take a quick look at Grace Annie. There she is there, Grace Annie Lockhart. And here's a little bio about Grace Annie. Let's take a minute to learn about her.
I dread the idea of living uselessly. Mary Electa Adams was a pioneer of women's education in Canada, helping open the doors of Canadian universities to women. In 1854, she became the first preceptress of the Mount Allison Ladies' College, developing a rigorous academic curriculum, demonstrating that women were capable of receiving the same instruction as men. Also a pioneer in the study of modern languages and literature, Mary Electa Adams was designated a National Historic Person by the Canadian government in 2004.
I became convinced of the need for women doctors, and I saw that while earning my living in that way, I could help my sex. Maria Louisa Agwin decided to become a physician when Canadian medical schools weren't accepting women. After graduating Mount Allison in 1869 with a liberal arts diploma, she took a teaching job to raise enough money to attend the Women's Medical College of New York Infirmary of Women and Children. She graduated in 1862, returning to Nova Scotia to become the first woman licensed to practice medicine in the province.
The higher education of women is quite as imperative a necessity on the behalf of human progress as that of man himself. In 1874, Grace Annie Lockhart completed a Mistress of Liberal Arts degree at the Mount Allison Ladies Academy. She then formally enrolled at the Mount Allison's College, where she would graduate with a degree of Bachelor of Science in English Literature, becoming the first woman in the British Commonwealth to be granted a bachelor's degree.
At first, the men laughed at the idea of my doing a job down there. They laughed at the idea of me being there because I was a woman. After Roberta Jane Taylor earned a Diploma of Fine Arts at Mount Allison in 1925, she would go to New York, where she would continue her education. She would become an illustrator during New York's burgeoning women's art scene in the 1920s and 30s, even getting illustrations published in the New Yorker. Moving back to the Maritimes, she would be hired by the Canadian Car and Foundry as their only female draftsperson, helping design components for aircraft, supporting the Canadian war effort in the 1940s.
We must not neglect the opportunity to make our views known to those who legislate. Even better, elect women legislators. When Gwendolyn MacDonald Black graduated Mount Allison in 1933, she became only the second student to be awarded a Bachelor of Music degree from Mount Allison. Gwen would go on to become a community leader and a very powerful advocate of women's rights. Among her many contributions to the community, she co-founded the Sackville branch of the Canadian Federation of University Women. She also remained a strong supporter of Mount Allison, serving on the Board of Regents, the University Senate, and the President's Committee on the Status of Women. In 1974, she became the first woman from New Brunswick to be named an Officer of the Order of Canada.
All right, so that sort of highlights a few really amazing Canadian women through Canada's history that really made changes to how gender equity was becoming more common. Okay, so from the 20th century forward, women were discouraged from working outside the home, and this would be called the Victorian ideal of womanhood. Okay. During the First and Second World Wars, the government encouraged women to work while men were away. But once the fighting was over, women were actively discouraged from working, and they were seen as taking jobs away from men and were usually paid less than men. So it wasn't until the 1960s when the women's movement swept across North America and Europe. So you'll see that most of the jobs, like 1888, textile mill, nurses, they're all caregiving. Housekeepers, servants, 86% of women in 1901 were not working outside of the home. In 1906, there was a nuclear physicist, Harriet Brooks. She was asked to resign her position when she decided to get married. Okay, so if you were married, that's it. Your career was over. And then in 1907, female Bell telephone operators went on strike when the company demanded that the operators work 5 to 8 hours longer without an increase in pay. All right, so we're going to look at some trends because the last little while during class, we've been talking about looking at trends and see things, how things changed over time. Just like the jobs we were talking about yesterday, we're talking about how the trends of men and women changed over time. So if you look at women aged 15 and over, in 1976, there were 3,619.2 women aged 15 and over, and 41% of them were working. Whereas men aged 15 and over, 72% of them were working. Okay, so women as a percentage of total employment in 1976 was 37.1. But if we go all the way down, you'll see that things have improved, but very slowly. In 2009, 58% of women and 65% of men. Still, only 47% were women. Okay. So the number of working mothers also increased dramatically in Canada since the 1960s and 70s. And although some women chose to stay home with their children, many very young children attended daycare or preschool while their mothers worked. Today, Canadian women often juggle everything, career, family, until their children are grown. So 1912, Carrie Derrick became the first professor at McGill University. Okay. First woman to achieve the status in Canada. And then we progressively are making great strides in women's roles in history. During First World War, women do the jobs of men, but then women also worked in banks, offices, factories. 1921, the Public Service Commission put limits on the number of women recruited into civil service. So that was a little step back. It's almost like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 1929, the Privy Council of England overruled the Supreme Court of Canada and declares women to be persons. Okay, making them eligible to be appointed to the Senate of Canada. And in 1930, Caroline Ray Mackay Wilson was appointed the first female senator. All right. Employment rates of women with children by age of the youngest child. So there's some really neat data here. So women under 55 with no children at home, 60% of them were working. Youngest child less than 16, only 40% of them were working. So big, big difference when there were children in the home. Things progressively got better in 1931. Still, women are working in clothing industry. Martha Louise Black in 1935 became the second woman ever elected to Canadian Parliament. In 1978, that's a big difference. So 1800s to 1978 is when the Canadian Human Rights Act ensures equal pay for equal value work. Okay, because not too long before that, 71% of women were not even part of the paid labor force back in 1961. Think about it, that's not that long ago, really. Okay, what women earn. This is a big point of contention still in Canada. One factor that continues to hold women back financially is that the average earning of women continues to be less than those of men. Even when men and women are being compared as workers in the same job or workers at the same level of responsibility, men usually still earn more than women. Okay, here's a table that compares it, but I think we're just going to take a look at a video because I much prefer to listen to someone else talk. So let's take a look at Canada's gender equity. I'm just going to switch pages here. All right. There we go.
Canada's gender employment gap, that's the difference between the employment rate between men and women, is the smallest among G7 countries at 8.9%. The provinces with the highest employment rates also have the largest employment gaps. Toronto and Vancouver have some of the largest employment gaps. And while 6.5% more women hold university degrees than men, the rate of employment for men is still higher. And more women are employed in part-time work than men. In STEM fields, only about a quarter of those who are employed are women. Women employed full-time earn 87 cents to the dollar compared to the average man.
So isn't that interesting? So more women have degrees, more women work part-time, and women generally earn 87 cents to every dollar a man earns in 2021. Pretty incredible data there. Let's go see how it's changed even probably since this article has been written. Let's zip down to what women earn. So in management occupations, men earn $36 an hour. This was 2008. And females earn $29 an hour, 80% of the wage and earned by a man. So super interesting. There's more equity here in sort of the nurturing, caring type environments like health and arts and culture. But you can see there's real discrepancies when it comes to manufacturing, industry, transportation, sciences, business. There's still big gaps in the wage equity. So regardless, Canadian women continue to shape the workplace through innovation and persistence in achieving pay equity and diversity in the workplace. Gender discrimination is not a thing of the past. We've made really good strides in the last 50 years, but as you read in the previous pages, women do continue to earn less than men. They also tend to be underrepresented in many, many management positions. So some terminology that you need to be familiar with are pay equity, where the principle of men and women earning the same, diversity, okay, gender, race, ethnicity, ability, faith, and other factors in the workplace should be happening. Gender discrimination is still common, or paying them less. Norms is standards or patterns of behavior that are expected from groups of people. Okay, glass ceiling is a term you might have heard, where a barrier to advancement in the workplace that is real but easily ignored. Glass being, you can still see through the glass, so nobody really notices that barrier. And just the two terms that you need to be familiar with are CEO, which is Chief Executive Officer, the person who's overall in charge of the company, and CFO, which is Chief Financial Officer, the person responsible for the finances of a company. So the differences between genders aren't just physical. Each person's attitudes, expectations, and behaviors are shaped by his relationship or her relationship within society. Men and women often assume roles based on social and cultural norms, not necessarily physical, intellectual, or personal ability. Okay? In upper levels of corporate Canada, so places like Toronto, where you see big organizations, wage inequity or inequality has been most pronounced for women leaders. Okay? Opportunities to join the ranks of management has improved, but most women executives have experienced something called a glass ceiling, which excludes them from the best paying jobs. All right, let's learn a little bit more about a glass ceiling.
You are either too reticent or you are too bossy. Worldwide, women hold 1 in 4 senior leadership roles. But if we look at who's running the company, just 12% of CEOs are women. So, is business giving women a bad deal? Well, let's look at Silicon Valley, where women hold just 1 in 10 senior positions. A recent survey of the world's tech powerhouse asked women to reveal their workplace woes, and, well, it wasn't pretty. 60% had faced unwanted sexual advances. 65% felt left out from social events because they were a woman. And 84% had been told they were too aggressive. It sounds like, in many cases, women aren't just hitting a glass ceiling, they might also be climbing a broken ladder. Ultimately, women end up quitting tech jobs at more than double the rate of men. So why is a more balanced boardroom so important? Well, research suggests that companies led by mixed gender teams actually deliver better results. The bottom line is that diversity isn't just about ticking boxes. Frankly, it's just good business sense. And as the chairman of one Fortune 500 company puts it, half the population are female. And if they're not working for me, they're working for someone else.
I really like that comment. If they're not working for me, they're working for somebody else. So why not hire people regardless of what their gender is, as long as they're best fit for the job? So women will continue to succeed despite the many challenges they face in the workplace. And there's a few examples that you can read about on your own. Tatiana Fraser, who founded Girls in Action Foundation. There's Christina Morse, a branch manager for president of Canadian Construction for Women. There's Roxanne Joel, who is an experienced international development practitioner. So your tasks for today at the end of this class is you're going to do 9.1, 9.2, and 9.3 assignments. The first one is the best of times and the worst of times. So what you're going to do is you're going to use this information using the timeline and the tables to identify positive and negative aspects of life for women in Canada after the Second World War. So how you get there is you're going to go to your assignment. Okay, you're going to open it up. Let's go to the demo students assignment here. And you're going to go and do the assignment, the best of times. And here's an example for you. In 1978, Equal Pay for Equal Work and Human Rights Act was formed. So that was a positive. So then you're going to find a negative, the worst of times. After Second World War, women had to give up their jobs for men. In 1955, women were barred from federal civil service. So all of the information you'll find in the text that we were looking at. Let me just show you how to get there. If you click on gender on the job, you look at topic 9, find at least, I want to say, 3 more good things that happened and 3 negative things that happened for women, and work it and figure and put it into the LM 9.1. All right, now I'm going to see what you think. Employment in Canada by gender. So I want you to take a look, and I just want your opinion. This is not marked for marks. You're just going to say, okay, Canadians are employed in the following occupation categories. For each category, indicate whether you think more men or more women are employed in these jobs. And when you're done, you're going to check your work from Stats Canada and see if you were correct. For example, I would say in agriculture, there would be more men in agriculture. So I'm going to go to the Stats Can site. And I'm going to look for agriculture. Oops. Data, that's what I'm looking for. Agriculture and food. In Canada. So you can sort and filter all the information here. Okay. And you could even use your friend Google and go to Women in Agriculture Stats Canada. There we go. Number of women farmers is also on the rise from 27% in 2011 to 28.7%. So only 28.7%, maybe slightly more, are women in agriculture. So you can pretty much guarantee that men would be more. 75% of men are in agriculture versus women. All right, so you're going to go and look at Stats Canada after you make predictions on here. And then at the end, you're going to answer the question, which I will post right now. Were you correct? Okay, so in the question, I'm going to say which job were you most incorrect about when doing the Stats Canada? Why do you think this is? Maybe let's just put, which job were you most surprised about? Surprised you the most? And why do you think this is? Okay, so you're going to answer that question. We're going to put it under thinking. It'll be due on Sunday. And we're going to put it under topic 9, gender in the workplace. And then your last task for today's class is to go down to Women at Work interview, and you're going to find somebody at your job, okay, a woman who's working somewhere in your community, and fill out this interview, okay? And then at the end, you're going to reflect on what you learned from topic 9, what can you conclude about the changing roles of men and women in the workplace? So that's your task for today's class. You have until Sunday to complete it. Oh, look at that. We seem to be right on the mark. So I would say for the other half hour of this class, you're going to do LM9-1 and LM9-2. And then for your extra hours worth of work, which is allocated for this course, you're going to do the Women at Work interview. You're going to interview a woman somewhere that works in your community, and then you're going to reflect at the bottom of how this agrees or disagrees, or how do you conclude about how roles of men and women in the workplace are changing. And maybe you'll find some contradictions in your own home community that will leave you thinking. So we're going to stop it there. Thank you so much for being such active members of our learning community, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how you get on with your interviews. All right, reach out to me. I will pull up my email, kbirch@nnec.on.ca if you need help. My cell phone is also listed underneath, and don't be shy. Reach out if you need help to fill in an assignment. All right, have a great evening.